China Global Television Network.
The U.S. rattled by the Capitol building riot as questions emerge over security. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang is in Tanzania on the fourth leg of his Africa tour. And the UK extends a ban on travellers entering England to a further 11 African countries. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. In business, Tesla chief Elon Musk becomes the world's richest person. And in sports, South Sudan's historic soccer win over Uganda raises hopes of better days ahead. We start the hour in the United States, which is still reeling after supporters of President Donald Trump stormed the Capitol building on Wednesday. Trump's tone has shifted dramatically, however. He's now acknowledged Joe Biden will take office later this month. But several members of Trump's cabinet are stepping down as Biden calls the siege one of the darkest days in U.S. history. Jaguruti Dave reports from Washington.
President Trump in a video has called for healing and reconciliation. He called the actions of the rioters, said that they were not American. And it was a marked contrast to the video that he released only 24 hours ago, around about that time, where he said to those protesters storming the Capitol building, "We love you." Let's just take a look at the president's latest video.
A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th. My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power. This moment calls for healing and reconciliation. Our country, serving as your president, has been the honor of my lifetime. And to all of my wonderful supporters, I know you are disappointed, but I also want you to know that our incredible journey is only just beginning.
There have been many critics of the president's reaction, his approach, his stance has happened. One of those obviously was President-elect Joe Biden, who was hugely critical of what took place in the nation's capital. He called the crowds storming the Capitol building a riotous mob. Let's take a listen.
Yesterday, in my view, one of the darkest days in the history of our nation. An unprecedented assault on our democracy. They weren't protesters. Don't dare call them protesters. They were a riotous mob, insurrectionists, domestic terrorists. No one can tell me that if had been a group of Black Lives Matter protesting yesterday, they wouldn't have been treated very, very differently than the mob of thugs that stormed the Capitol. We all know that's true. And it is unacceptable, totally unacceptable.
Now, some people will clearly be relieved that President Trump has finally acknowledged the transition of power is going to take place. But many people will also be thinking that it's perhaps too little, too late.
Well, now there are questions about how one of the most secure buildings in the United States could be overrun. The Capitol Police Force is a force of, in fact, 2,300 officers, but now added defense measures have been put in place around the Capitol grounds. Owen Fairclough has more.
The barricades have gone up, but almost 24 hours too late. This is the area on the east side of the U.S. Capitol building, the seat of U.S. Congress, where some of Donald Trump's most fervent supporters were able to overrun security and the smaller barriers in the background and storm the Capitol building, turning what would ordinarily be a procedural part of the peaceful transfer of power to certify Joe Biden as the next U.S. president into one of the most shocking moments in modern U.S. history, and turning this area into a visitor attraction for all the wrong reasons.
I think our democracy is struggling to survive. I do. I think that what happened here is a shame. I do not condone the violence. That should have not happened. That's not who Trump supporters are. We support our law enforcement. We support our republic, our constitutional republic. So that was shameful. don't associate with the people who broke in.
There may have been some bad seeds, but for the most part, when you see that violence going on and the windows being broken and things like that, that's not your Trump supporters. That was a setup. It's disgusting what's happened. We love our president. People are just, they want to see the best for this country.
I think that it's just bad. I think everything that's going on is bad, and I think that what happened yesterday is a travesty.
President Trump's supporters dispute what went on in the Capitol, as well as the motivations for those responsible. But for lawmakers, the pressing question is this: why, when thousands of people were expected in Washington, D.C. for weeks to protest the counting of electoral college votes, was the seat of the U.S. government not secure enough to withstand being overrun by a mob? The FBI has confirmed it's looking for information on specific individuals who were caught on film and went viral during this event in relation to what happened. And lawmakers are also asking for details on the specific timeline as to when, for example, the Capitol Police, who are responsible for securing this area, requested that backup. Just many of the details that will emerge over the days and weeks to come. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
Well, another death has now been reported stemming from that violence in Washington on Wednesday. Capitol Police officer Brian Sicknick died on Thursday from injuries sustained while engaging with Trump supporters the day before. Officials have not said what exactly his injuries were, but homicide investigators are looking into it. Nearly 50 police officers were in fact injured in that assault on the Capitol building. And that now brings the death of Officer Sicknick now brings the total of people that have died from the unrest to 5. This includes a woman who was shot and killed by officers. Well, now let's move to international news. The United Kingdom will extend a ban on travelers to England coming from 11 southern African countries. These measures aim to prevent the spread of a new COVID-19 variant that has been identified in South Africa. Now, as far as we understand, the restrictions will take effect on Saturday and they will remain in place for 2 weeks. The countries affected include Namibia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Seychelles and Mauritius. Entry into England will be banned to those who have travelled from or through any of those countries in the last 10 days. The UK had previously imposed a temporary entry ban on passengers arriving from South Africa from the 24th of December. Of course, this excluded British nationals, visa holders and permanent residents on condition they self-isolate for 10 days. Pfizer and BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccines appear to be effective against a key mutation in the highly transmissible new variants of the coronavirus. This according to a laboratory study by the US drug maker. The recent variants of the virus discovered in the UK and South Africa share a common mutation that is possibly responsible for greater transmissibility. There have been concerns that this could enable the virus to escape antibody neutralization by the vaccine. The study was facilitated by blood taken from around 20 people who had been administered with the vaccine. However, its findings remain limited as it does not examine the full set of mutations found in either of the new variants. A northern Chinese city remains under lockdown. This as dozens of new coronavirus cases continue to emerge. All residents are prohibited from leaving Shijiazhuang. Traffic restrictions have also been put in place. This after the city increased its emergency response to its highest level. Well, on Thursday, China reported 53 new coronavirus cases, and of those, many of them were coming from domestic transmissions from Hebei province. Our reporter Ning Hong has more.
I'm now at the major highway entrance to the city, and it's also an exit. You can see this place is empty and the highway entrance is blocked, and it has been like this since this Wednesday. And yesterday the city issued a more strict regulations about people leaving and entering the city, and only necessary people bringing trucks and cars bringing necessary supplies to the city or personnel, especially medical personnel, could enter or leave the city. Also, people are asked to stay in their community, waiting for medical staff to screen the nucleic acid test results. And many communities have finished the test and they're waiting for the results. We visited one of the hospitals, the People's Hospital of General City, and there people set a temporary lab to test these samples, and ambulances are sending samples collected from each community. And there are a lot of people from nearby hospitals and medical clinics to come here to the city to help with collecting and also testing these samples. And yesterday, the city has tested about 6 million samples, and the result of 240 million have come out. But it would take much more time because the city has 11 million people.
Well, Egypt has begun rolling out home care services for COVID-19 patients nationwide. The step follows a surge in infections and, of course, mounting pressure on public health services. Egyptian Health Minister Hala Zayed says the initiative should significantly decrease the infections mortality rate. Here's Adel Al-Makhraoui with more.
Starting this week, the Egyptian Health Ministry says it will dispatch some 20,000 medical teams to check up on non-hospitalized COVID-19 patients. The initiative will depend on the country's 5,400 municipal health services centers and will be supported with 800 medical convoys.
I want to make sure that the cases treated at home don't come to me when they have deteriorated greatly. We've discovered that at least 50 to 60% of the mortalities happen within the first 24 hours after admission to hospitals. They come at a very critical stage and deteriorate much faster. We are to be the first country in the world to do so.
The campaign will start with the most infected districts. Medical teams will measure patients' vitals and loan oximeters so those at higher risk can monitor their oxygen saturation. The health minister says the first visit to all patients should be accomplished within 2 weeks.
There is a surge in infection. While Egypt has only 320 hospitals that receive COVID-19 patients, the initiative will definitely lift some pressure off hospitals. It could decrease mortality rates because now those with deteriorating conditions can be identified. There is a channel for them to find proper instructions and services.
One of the tasks of that initiative is to ensure patients have access to standard medications recommended by the government.
An estimated 90% of COVID-19 patients in Egypt are being treated at home. Most of them get diagnosed in the private sector and follow a treatment protocol at home, so they are not part of the official infection figures.
Official figures have so far registered more than 145,000 COVID-19 infections in total. The past week has seen a continuous drop in new daily infections. On Wednesday, health authorities announced 1,007 new cases and 57 deaths. Adel Al-Makhraoui, CGTN, Cairo.
To Zimbabwe now, where a COVID-19 survivor has spoken out about the disease and the trauma of stigmatization. Saul Sakudya was one of the first people to test positive in 2020, followed by 3 members of his family. Currently, Zimbabwe is facing a resurgence in COVID-19 cases, forcing the government to impose a 30-day lockdown. As the country's healthcare system struggles to cope with rising cases, Sakudya stresses the importance of moral support for victims as key to their survival and healing.
There was stigma and discrimination because people, everyone, they were afraid of passing through my gate. No one was coming near me, which was okay. Because of this type of disease. So I accepted it. It was not an easy journey. It was a very, very difficult journey. This virus, you need a moral support from others. It helps a lot. It gives you hope. I want to thank my neighbors. They helped me because they were checking on me every day. Even my relatives, they were checking on me every day. So I think it's very important if your relative or a friend is not feeling well, give me a word of hope.
Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. As campaigning continues in Uganda, candidates are courting young voters ahead of next week's presidential election. Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories. Let's have a look. We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Shibuya, Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Experts warn the death toll in the United States from the coronavirus pandemic could grow by 60,000 by the end of the month. 364,000 Americans have already died from COVID-19. Hospitals are indeed overwhelmed, even as vaccines continue to be rolled out. Mary Maloney has more on what could be the next peak of the pandemic in the U.S.
COVID-19 is claiming more lives than ever before.
This is a wake-up call for us. This is the last wake-up call we might get.
The virus continues to sweep across the country, breaking records for daily deaths.
We are in a very, very difficult surge of cases in our country that is record-breaking every single day. It's terrible.
Hospitals filled, healthcare workers and first responders overwhelmed.
It's a tremendous amount of pressure. If the hospital's unavailable, I just don't have the resources that patient may need.
In California, the epicenter of the current coronavirus surge, ICUs and waiting rooms packed with patients. Some facilities forced to turn people away.
How do you explain that to the patient? They don't understand that. How do you explain that to the patient's family when you're looking at them and saying, I'm sorry, I can't help?
As cases grow, some states are allowing more groups of people to receive coronavirus vaccines. The CDC says nearly 17.3 million vaccine doses have been distributed, but only a fraction of that, about 5.3 million doses, have been put in arms.
Clearly, no excuses. We should have gotten 20 distributed and 20 into the arms of people. By 20, I mean 20 million.
Vaccines on the shelf or in a FedEx box are of no use. They need to get in people's arms, and that's our number one focus, because that will end the pandemic.
Yet most people will have to wait months until they can receive the life-saving vaccine. I'm Mary Maloney reporting.
Let's turn to elections in Uganda now. Candidates are busy courting young voters ahead of next week's presidential elections. Incumbent President Yoweri Museveni is facing competition from pop star and lawmaker Robert Chagulanyi, also known as Bobi Wine. Political pundits say young people constitute the biggest percentage of likely voters and could decide who will become the country's next president. CGTN's Hilary Ayasaga filed this report.
Sarah Nabakoza is a first-time voter. She's eagerly waiting to choose her leader in a few days to come.
Being a first-time voter, I'm really too excited. I can't wait for January 14th. Because that's when we'll vote our MPs, our presidential candidates. And I have my presidential candidate, the one I really think will take Uganda to the next level. So I'm really so excited.
Uganda has one of the youngest populations in the world. According to Uganda's Electoral Commission, they constitute about 67% of likely voters. With just a few days remaining to the polls, candidates are strategizing on how to win the election, and first-time voters are seen as the game changer in this election. Musician Bobi Wine, who is in the same age bracket, is urging young people to help him secure a win.
The majority, if not all, revolutions have been led by young people and by common people. We are the young people of this generation. We are 85% of the population. We are we are the excluded ones. We are the unemployed ones. We are the poor ones. We are the hungry.
But the incumbent President Yoweri Museveni says in the last 35 years, he has done a great deal for the country's young people and wants to secure their future.
For us, we are fighting for patriotism, Pan-Africanism, socio-economic transformation, democracy.
Political analysts say some of the key defining issues in this election include unemployment and poverty among young people.
Every 10 graduates in this country, only one can find a job. These are the peer people that can influence young people. They are unemployed. Jobs, if there are people who get jobs, it's technical know who is your father, who is your mother.
Pollsters say while Bobi Wine's message seems to resonate with young people, the incumbent President Yoweri Museveni could also attract support from this group. Hilary Isiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is in Tanzania for a 2-day visit. His visit aims to strengthen political and economic relations between the two countries. Wang Yi has so far launched a vocational education and training authority college in Chato district, and he's visited the Mwaloni fishing village on Lake Victoria. He's also held private talks with President John Magufuli. The visit is part of Wang Yi's 5-nation tour of Africa, which includes Nigeria, the Democratic of Congo, Botswana, and his final stop, the Seychelles. Well, China and Tanzania have a long history of social, diplomatic, and economic ties that spans over 5 decades. Here's CGTN's Daniel Kijo with more.
A friendship treaty signed between China and Tanzania in the 1960s marked a turning point in a relationship that has only continued to grow over the past 50 years. Chinese companies have constructed the Nyerere Bridge, the first cable-stayed bridge in East Africa, the Ubungo flyover, the first multi-layer, multi-track flyover in Tanzania, and the upgrade of Dar es Salaam's port, among other major projects. Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit to Tanzania aims to take that relationship even further.
This close relationship between Tanzania and China was started by the late father of our nation, Julius Nyerere, and then chairman of China, Mao Zedong. In 1964, Tanzania and China officially started their diplomatic relationship. In 1965, which was 56 years ago, Tanzania was among the first countries to sign a friendship contract with China.
The cooperation between these two countries also extends to culture and education. There are 2 Confucius Institutes and 2 Confucius schools in Tanzania, which allow tens of thousands of Tanzanian students to learn Chinese. According to the Center for Chinese Studies, over the past half-century, more than 20 million Tanzanians have received treatment from Chinese medical teams. The recent history between Tanzania and China has been more focused on cultural and economic diplomacy. Data from the Chinese embassy in Tanzania says the total volume of trade between China and Tanzania in 2019 was $208.7 billion, which Beijing says is 20 times higher than it was in the year 2000. According to the Tanzanian Investment Center, China has about 940 projects valued at $7.5 billion, projects that provide employment for 117,810 people. The main products that China exports into Tanzania are mechanical and electronic products, machinery, and vehicles. While the top 3 products exported by Tanzania to China are sesame, copper, and sisal. But the government says, going forward, the country wants to expand that scope.
Among other things is to ask the nation of China to open and expand the scope of Tanzanian products that are sold in China. Things like agricultural products, products from livestock, as well as marine products.
President Magufuli's government has been focused on making sure Tanzania becomes a middle-sized economy by 2025. Since 2015, Tanzania has shown intention to improve economic ties with Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, as well as other countries in Europe.
We have just entered into the lower level of the middle income economy. So you'll see these countries have much more to do today, maybe than 50 or 40 years ago. So we are hoping to see more partnership in areas of transfer of technology. Tanzania is industrializing. China was a bit industrialized since 1978.
Tanzania is considered a gateway to East and Central Africa. So both governments hope that the country can continue to play an important role in promoting trade and practical cooperation between China and countries in the region. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Chato, Tanzania.
Well, earlier we spoke to Professor Eliphas Tozo Bisanda, who is the Vice Chancellor of the Open University of Tanzania. He discussed what the Chinese Foreign Minister's visit means for Tanzania in terms of deepening cooperation and expanding opportunities.
China has been a friend to Tanzania for a very, very long time. Since the 1960s, we have Chou En-lai coming to Tanzania, and then, of course, several other things happened. We signed the agreement to build the Tazara railway line. It's a very, very long time ago, and of course, it is good that we have continued to sustain the good relationship between Tanzania and China. So the visit by Foreign Minister of China is particularly at this time is very, very timely, because Tanzania is on a development path which is very revolutionary. This particular visit by the Foreign Minister of China should open the door for more investments, for more trade, for more collaboration. But even in the sector of education, which I'm in, I can see more opportunities for China to partner with Tanzania. We already started, but we want to see more going. The Open University of China did establish some language teaching laboratories here. And we were hoping that this would open training into Tanzania into Chinese, and then the Tanzanians will teach the Chinese Kiswahili. There is a lot of opportunities. Tanzania produces minerals, produces agricultural products, and we have a very strong, very strong mining sector that is upcoming. But also Tanzania, we are surrounded by massive lakes, fishing is a big thing, and of course this is what we can give. Agricultural products, mining products, and etc. But also from China, we expect the importation of technology that will strengthen the agriculture and the mining sector. So there is a lot of room for cooperation in the two countries.
Your business news up next. Coming up, Tesla chief Elon Musk becomes the world's richest person. And Boeing to pay over $2.5 billion to resolve the investigation into the two MAX crashes that killed 346 people.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice. Tesla chief executive and billionaire entrepreneur Elon Musk has surpassed Amazon boss Jeff Bezos to become the world's richest person. According to a Bloomberg report, Musk, aged 49, now has a net worth of more than $188.5 billion. That's just $1.5 billion more than Bezos. Musk's personal wealth was boosted by last year's more than 8-fold surge in Tesla shares, which became the world's most valuable car maker. Musk has a 20% stake in the car maker and about $42 billion of unrealized paper gains on vested stock options. Tesla shares were up as much as 7.4% on Thursday at a record high of $811.61. The Forbes billionaires list, however, says Musk still trails Amazon's Bezos by $7.8 billion. Boeing will pay over $2.5 billion to resolve the U.S. Justice Department's investigation into 2 deadly 737 MAX crashes that killed 346 people. Boeing will, however, not be forced to plead guilty to criminal charges. The Justice Department said the settlement includes a criminal monetary penalty of $243 million and compensation payments to Boeing's 737 MAX airline customers of $1.77 billion. It also includes the establishment of a $500 million crash victim beneficiaries fund to compensate the heirs, relatives, and legal beneficiaries of the passengers. The crashes led to the plane's grounding for 20 months and was only lifted in November last year after Boeing made safety upgrades.
The FAA, and I in particular, will not approve the plane for return to passenger service until I'm satisfied that we've adequately addressed all of the known safety issues that played a role in the tragic loss of 346 lives aboard Lion Air Flight 610 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302. Not a day goes by that I and my colleagues don't think about the victims and their families.
I'm grateful and humbled to be here today and to be able to say these words to the families directly. And I want to convey our absolute commitment to safety, our commitment to learning, our commitment to rebuilding the public's confidence in what we do, and to preventing accidents from like this from ever happening again.
Well, despite the settlement, families of the victims of the Ethiopian Airlines 737 MAX crash are moving forward with a civil litigation case against Boeing in Chicago. The plaintiffs' lawyers say that the plane maker's payout, in fact, strengthens their lawsuit. Now, once described as Africa's economic miracle, Ethiopia is now struggling to maintain that status amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The government, distracted by a separatist movement in the country's north, is now trying to find ways of keeping its economy on track. It's also signaling a deeper commitment to improving the lives of its citizens through a 10-year development plan. Here's CGTN's Coletta Wanjoy with more.
According to the World Bank, Ethiopia's growth rate was at an impressive 8.4% in 2019. But the country is dealing with a heavy economic blow to a country once applauded by the international community for its economic reforms. Now the government insists that it wants its citizens to benefit as individuals, although there are now real questions over whether the country's economic growth can be sustained.
It didn't create enough jobs. Several people were displaced in the name of investment and development. So the problem was only few participated and benefited, and millions were left behind. And again, the second one is the source of growth itself. So the growth that we have registered in the past decade essentially came from public investment, be it in the infrastructure development or other social sector developments, and also projects in the owned by state-owned enterprises.
The government now blames the unequal way in which wealth was distributed in the past on the heavy emphasis on public sector-led projects. The government says that the past decade was characterized by low production and productivity, dwindling export earnings, stubborn inflation, and commercial loans that entailed huge interest rates. Now it wants to change this through a 10-year development plan that gives priority to the private sector.
For instance, in the access to finance, availing infrastructure, the binding constraints, energy, and other sectors. So that's really, really important. For instance, the private sector really wants to see the predictable policies and priority areas. Incentives only won't really work.
The plan is also aimed at attracting foreign investors independently or through public-private partnerships. Sam Rosmarin, an investment expert, says this will mean eliminating the hurdles that have discouraged investors for decades.
A lot of times, companies coming here are expecting that things have been changed rather than things are changing. And I think that misalignment sometimes is frustrating for some investors. Some of the things that I've heard are, access to foreign currency. Of course, it's not a liberalized banking system. Telecoms still being a monopoly. Land and land registration and land access. These are, business licensing and registration.
Rosmarin says the beginnings of economic reforms and liberalization, which means opening up certain sectors to the foreign investment, is a good start.
So that's really helpful for investors because I think a lot of innovate. And when you have a restrictive list, that doesn't allow innovation. So now we have a really good sort of innovative list. Also in recent memory, but not necessarily the last round of revisions, again, was this one-stop shop. So you used to have to go to 5 or 6 different ministries to get your investment approved, to get your business license, to get your staff, to get their work permits, etc. Now you go to one place, it's all handled in one office. They're all trained really well to interface with sort of foreign investors. They know our concerns.
The government says achieving its goal of a private sector-led economy by 2030 will be tough. But it is willing to work on streamlining the path for both domestic and foreign investors in a bid to turn Ethiopia into a middle-income economy. Colette Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Zimbabwe expects to see income grow by 14% by 2035 under the African Continental Free Trade Area. The World Bank says these benefits hinge on Zimbabwe's ability to increase production and enhance competitiveness while maintaining macroeconomic stability. Here's Farai Makutoya with that report.
About 85% of Zimbabwe's exports are raw minerals and commodities, while manufactured a mere 9% of gross domestic product. The Southern African country plans to double the latter and increase the share of value-added exports under the new trade dispensation. Its strong agricultural base is a low-hanging fruit to achieving this.
As a country, we have comparative advantage in terms of the horticulture. Yeah, and with COVID, etc., people are healthy foodstuffs, so we produce the avocados, the macadamia, the oranges, the prices went up due to COVID, vitamin C, etc., garlic, ginger. So we are definitely making a push towards that.
A series of virtual and physical trade shows are lined up, and women and youth-led businesses will be trained to get them export-ready. Trade experts stress that if Zimbabwe is to fully maximize on the benefits of the free trade area, it needs to expand the range of products that it sells to the wider market, and it must produce those goods efficiently. That will require the resuscitation of idle industries, massive investment to upgrade technology, and ongoing economic reforms to deliver.
The macroeconomic environment has to be supportive, so companies need to be competitive. You might be export ready, but the ease of doing business must also complement that. We appreciate efforts being done by government in terms of assisting issues to do with ease of doing business. But from our end, we are also working on the ease of doing export business, removing unnecessary documentation, etc., so that people spend time in the factory rather than working on the necessary documentation required for you to export.
The African Continental Free Trade Area will also pile pressure on domestic manufacturers.
Competitiveness is quite key. And when I say competitiveness, I mean production of a quality good at least cost. Because now, as much as it brings opportunities, with now Nigeria coming through, Egypt, these are big powers, even our neighbor South Africa. So we have to be able to compete with them.
In 2016, Zimbabwe imposed import restrictions on several products to protect local industries that were battling cheaper foreign goods. Farai Makutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
People living along Tunisia's coastline are becoming increasingly vulnerable to rising sea levels caused by climate change. Coastal erosion and warmer ocean waters are threatening habitats that are vital for sustaining human activity as well as marine biodiversity in the country. Here's CGTN's Adnan Chouachi with the details.
Hassan is a fisherman in the city of La Goulette in northern Tunisia. He was born and raised near the port, where he now earns a living through fishing. Hassan says climate change has had a negative impact on his work.
Fish populations are declining and fish food is becoming rarer as the sea warms. Some species have disappeared from this area over the past 4 decades. They were replaced by some invasive species. The decline in the size of fish is also noticeable while the quantity is very limited.
Experts have warned that diseases affecting some marine species are spreading. Many traditional fishermen fear they will lose their main source of income due to climate change.
Sometimes our catch is sick because bacteria and viruses are thriving. I am not a scientist, but I'm sure that climate change is impacting fisheries. The local economy depends on fishing. Thousands of jobs could be lost if the state does not act quickly.
The country's Secretary of State of the Sea says climate change poses a major challenge. The Tunisian government has launched several projects to protect sandy beaches and coastal aquifers.
The state is providing the necessary means and financial resources to protect the coastline and the population, especially fishermen who depend on the sea. In addition, Tunisia's coastline has a huge potential for the development of the blue economy. There is an urgent need to build the marine ecosystem's resilience against climate change.
A recent study by the Tunisian Union of Agriculture and Fisheries has revealed that climate change has affected some fish species that have shifted away from shallow coastal waters, where temperatures will increase fastest, into deeper, cooler waters. The partnership between the Department of Maritime Affairs and several international organizations, as well as the civil society, aims to improve livelihoods on the coastline. Tunisian authorities have urged Mediterranean countries to cooperate in order to limit the impact of climate change. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
To China now, where the imminent closure of a popular bookstore in Shanghai has led to opposition and disappointment online. For more than 2 decades, the shop has served avid readers with a unique collection that includes rare books. There are fears that its value cannot be replaced. Our reporter Liu Jianhua has more.
Walls of used books. This store has been a fixture near Shanghai's Fudan University for more than 20 years, and now its time is taken away. Authorities want to renovate the neighborhood and are ordering its closure. The owner Zhang Qiang has dedicated more than 2 decades of life to the business and he's given half year to move to another location.
我们主要就是高校的老师、学生还有周边的居民吧。
有很多老书。
对的，你看，对，看像这一套，这个雨果文集， The Man Who Laughs。对，1896年印刷的，而且是倒领纸，印刷你看非常精美。我们这边呢，就是像类似于这样的比较珍贵的一些老的书籍呢，还能够轻易的找到，在新书店那是不太可能的了。
Zhang's shop has managed to survive until now, while many competitors went out of business.
我可能没有那种，再来个10年或者20年，来重新去打造一个文化角落的那种经历了。所以就是对于我来说，这个书店如果关闭掉的话，那么就有可能真的是就关闭了。
As old bookstores disappear one by one, new and fancy ones are burgeoning in China. Figures show that China had more than 70,000 brick and mortar bookstores in 2019. More than 4,000 opened in that year alone. Home appliances retail giant Suning jumped on the bandwagon in 2019.
Books draw more customers, which can boost the traffic in our shopping mall and help with the sales of home appliances and other electronic products. In terms of the time customers spend in a shopping mall, people may only stay for half an hour in a traditional home appliances shop. Now with the book stands, food courts and cinemas all in one place, people tend to stay longer.
Sales of physical books experience fierce competition from e-books and online bookstores when e-commerce started to rise in China. The publishing industry began to have a comeback in China in recent years as a new breed of sleekly designed bookstores emerged, and some of them have become selfie-worthy hotspots promoted by online influencers. But the real question is, will they satisfy the needs of those who simply want to enjoy the pleasure of getting lost in a great read? Li Jianhua, CGTN, Shanghai.
You're watching Africa Live. More news after this short break.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
A teenage taekwondo enthusiast in Zimbabwe is using the sport to rally young girls and mothers against child marriage. Women's groups have warned that early marriages could be increasing as COVID-19 keeps children away from school. Joy Kuruki with the details.
17-year-old Natsiraishi Maritza is a taekwondo student. She has been a martial arts fan since the age of 5. She's using taekwondo to give girls in an impoverished community a fighting chance at life.
I do taekwondo, and with it I want to create an early marriage-free Africa. I want to help stop drug abuse, because most of the teenagers are getting involved into drugs, so I want to occupy them with taekwondo.
Natsiraishi's students line up outside her parents' home in the Epworth settlement. Some are as young as 4 and are now married. They follow her every instruction.
Since I was in primary school, most of my friends got impregnated and they got into marriages. And then when I went to high school, I realized that some of them now have kids and they're facing problems. These early marriages have led to gender-based violences, and they are still kids. They cannot look after their family, so they're being beaten, they're experiencing abuses, and this is really paining me.
In 2016, Zimbabwean law prohibited early marriage till the age of 18. Prior to that, legislation allowed girls to marry at 16. But according to the United Nations Children's Fund, 30% of girls in Zimbabwe are still being married off before reaching 18.
With the young ladies and the young girls, I'm going to talk to them about the challenges they're experiencing, and also I'm going to use my sport, taekwondo, to encourage them not to get into marriages and early pregnancies.
Natsiraishi is hoping to increase the confidence of her students through her association called Vulnerable Underaged People's Auditorium. A recent ban on public gatherings imposed by the government after a new COVID-19 surge has forced Natsiraishi to suspend the sessions. She's however hopeful they will resume training once the restriction is lifted. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
And here's what's coming up in sports. South Sudan's historic soccer win over Uganda raises hopes of better days ahead.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.